Okay, Dory, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. By my watch and the clock on the wall, it is 10 a.m. Time to call to order the Board of Directors Special Meeting Workshop for Wednesday, August 9th, 2023. Could I have a roll call, please?
Director Meyerhoffen,
Present.
Director Griffith,
Present.
Director Duff,
Present.
Vice President Sewell,
Here.
President Martin.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
Those of you paying attention, I skipped item 2 because we're all here and it isn't necessary. Public input. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters within the board's jurisdiction. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. State law prohibits the board from discussing or taking action on any item not listed on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public wishing to address the board? Seeing none, okay. I have been asked, before we go any further, to change the agenda order so that we hear item number 6 next, the hexavalent chromium MCL update. Brian?
Thank you very much, President Martin, members of the board, staff. The item in front of you today is to discuss the proposed maximum contaminant level, or MCL, for hexavalent chromium, or Chrome 6. You know how we like to shorten things, so just making sure everybody understands the acronyms. The most recent time we discussed Chrome 6 with the board was April 2022, when the state had opened the comment period related to the draft Chrome 6 MCL at the time, which was 10 parts per billion. It's what it was when it was actually an MCL, and it's the draft that they're looking at again at this time as well. In 2022, we submitted a comment letter as part of a coordinated effort with other Coachella Valley water agencies and Aqua. Similar to April 2022, the State Water Board is again asking for comments related to Chrome 6 with the maximum contaminant level again at 10 parts per billion. The current comment period was extended from August 4th to August 18th. We are working with our consultant, Chad Seidel, who was on the call and will be presenting on behalf of the district and will be helping us draft the comment letter. Once the letter is drafted, we will share it with the board. Chad, at this time, can you introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, members of the board. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little low. Can you?
I'll get a little closer. Hope I can get over the background noise. I appreciate your accommodating moving the agenda items so I could participate remotely. As Brian indicated, I'm going to provide an update with respect to hexavalent chromium. Myself and I'm president of Corona Environmental Consulting, and our staff have a long history of addressing hexavalent chromium questions for the water community. It was actually the focus of my PhD research in the early 2000s. And glad to give you a quick update here and answer any questions you may have. Clearly, there are many, many more details that will come to pass as it impacts the district. And we'll cover those as you need, as those come up. So chromium is a heavy metal found naturally throughout the environment. It has two common states, trivalent and hexavalent. And hexavalent is the one that is being regulated. It's been used routinely, but the thing to note is that trivalent chromium is a known micronutrient. You can actually go to the health food store and buy supplements that include trivalent chromium. But hexavalent chromium has been known for quite some time to be carcinogenic, first and foremost by inhalation, breathing in vapors that have chromium. So imagine industrial workers at a chromium plating facility over a vat of hot chromium solution. That, unfortunately, that was the human indicators of carcinogenic impact. And then there's a spectrum of opinions on the health impacts of hexavalent chromium via ingestion, and I'll touch on that in just a little bit. But it does go by a lot of names: chromium 6, chrome 6, chromium hexavalent, hexchrome, often the air board.
You're breaking up
on it, but let's. Okay, let me see if it's any better now. Can you tell me when I return, and I'll continue?
You're on. It's just periodically you break up in your presentation.
Understood. I apologize. Please do give me another indication. If that happens, then I'll cover any aspects.
Okay.
Now, the Coachella Valley is known to be home to chromium in groundwater supplies, predominantly because it's naturally occurring. You know, chromium is abundant in the Earth's crust, and particularly from serpentine rock formations, which are well known to exist in the area there. It happens to be the California state rock. But the Coachella Valley is not alone in locations that are known to have chromium above the 10 microgram per liter or part per billion threshold that the state is proposing or reproposing as the MCL. And you see that on the map there to the right. There's a lot of places that have that. And we have dealt with this in pretty much every one of those locations, areas across the state. Now, in Coachella Valley in particular, there's work that's been done to better understand it. The point of this map is simply to illustrate that, yes, some of your groundwater supplies are impacted, similar to other area water supplies. Now, here are the average chromium-6 concentrations for the district's wells, average since 2014. And you'll note that of the wells that are kind of closer in town there are several of those that have values, average values exceeding the proposed 10 microgram per liter or part per billion level. Right there at 24, 27, 29, and 37. Now, the other wells that are further to the west are not impacted in that way, and there's some differences of the geology that leads to that. Now, it's really important to understand the health effects implications here as it pertains to how you make decisions about how to address these contaminants, as well as communicate to your customers and to the public. So California WEHA has long held the perspective that chromium-6 is a credible carcinogen via ingestion at what I would describe as low environmentally derived oral exposures, meaning concentrations at and below 10 micrograms per liter. That's based upon a national toxicology program study, and those data from dosing rats and mice with hexavalent chromium that led to tumors substantiates their final 0.02 microgram per liter or part per billion chromium-6 public health goal. That translates to a theoretical cancer risk of drinking hexavalent chromium daily for 70 years, 2 liters per day at 10 micrograms per liter, to give a potential carcinogenic cancer risk of 1 in 2,000. Now, the other end of the spectrum is peer-reviewed literature and other health bodies outside of California, Health Canada, World Health Organization, some other state entities, Texas, for example, have used more recent literature that substantiates that chromium-6 is not a credible carcinogenic risk at low concentrations. And there's actually a safe drinking water equivalent level of above 200 micrograms per liter. And the reason for that, as I mentioned before, you've got hexavalent chromium with carcinogenic concern, and you have trivalent chromium, which you can buy at the health food store. And the thing that differs between them is if it changes from chromium-6 to chromium-3. And the human body has a natural ability to reduce compounds, including things like hexavalent chromium. And so, you know, our typical gastric
You're breaking up again.
Oh, I apologize. That is disappointing. I think I got to the point where I wanted to move to the next slide about history. Hearing me okay?
You're still breaking up periodically, so and I think we've lost you.
What we're doing here. Any better, folks?
Maybe he could call him.
Any better, folks?
Well, speak.
Just go ahead and keep talking and we'll work through it.
Yeah, just continue talking.
Will do. I think I'm at a place now where we can just walk through the rest of this and transit can be done. So I just wanted to give that perspective of the health implications because there's a diversity of opinion on that. But for water utilities like yourselves in California, lay of the land is the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. That's what we always recommend going on. And so it's important to know that, though, particularly for how you communicate about this. Now, the regulatory history for chromium is very long-winded, and I'm not going to go through everything other than to say, over a decade ago, when the concerns about hexavalent chromium really within the public, chromium-6 was not specifically regulated in California or nationally. And there's always been total chromium maximum contaminant levels of 100 micrograms per liter by EPA nationally and 50 micrograms per liter by California. Those include both chromium-6 and chromium-3. And since that time, over the course of the last decade, there have been new public health goals established, as I mentioned before.
We lost you again. It-
All right, maybe address the poor connection reestablishing. Any better there?
Yes, we'll manage the slides from here. That may have been taking up some of your bandwidth. So we'll just manage the slides from here.
Oh, it could have been.
So we'll start off with regulatory status as you were halfway through that slide.
Great, thank you so much. So on the regulatory history slide there of chromium-6 there, it wasn't specifically regulated in California or nationally, and the total chromium standards applied. And in the course of the last 10 years, California did implement a 10 microgram per liter MCL back in 2014. There was a Senate bill that provided a time the Superior Court been about regulatory history.
You're breaking up. I'm sorry. You're breaking up again.
Let me see if I should rather call into this same line. Just bear with me.
Okay. Isn't technology great?
You check, you test, and then it still doesn't stand where it's at.
So just for clarification, when we decided to have this meeting and we set the date, he unfortunately had another interview in Glendale going after a Chrome 6 project as well. So it starts at 11 o'clock. So again, I appreciate you allowing him to present this. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we obviously have a technical issue, but.
All right, should be in the meeting room now.
Okay, we'll give it a try.
All right, any better?
You're louder, yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for accommodating the technical difficulties. I look forward to being there in person to having a much better, clear communication on the subject. So moving forward, as you see on the slide there for regulatory status, since the invalidation of the MCL, which was based upon the judge's decision that the state had not substantiated the economic feasibility of the MCL, there have been a few steps of providing public comment and a few updates on the public health goal that have substantiated again for California their view of it being carcinogenic at low concentrations. EPA actually put out a draft review that is similar to OEHA, so it could be that the national view will continue that way. And most importantly, in June of this year, the California Division of Drinking Water put forth their proposed reissued MCL with a 45-day comment period. Now, that comment period has been extended to August 18th, and there are opportunities to submit comments before that, and that's one of the tasks that we've been asked to help support. Now, if we go to the next slide, the MCL, very similar to what was in place before, 10 micrograms per liter based upon running annual averages of quarterly samples. So every source that you operate has to be monitored every quarter, 4 quarters in a row averaged, and those have to stay less than 10 micrograms per liter. Now, a good thing that's been added in the draft, which we do hope and expect will be included in the final regulation, is a compliance schedule. This is the first time ever the state of California has included a compliance schedule. So for systems like yours with a population of greater than 10,000, 2 years are being afforded after the regulation takes effect to be in compliance. So meaning the earliest that all of your sources would have to comply would be January of 2026. Now, that's nice, but I will tell you the public comments that are being submitted are very clear that 2 years is likely insufficient to accomplish everything necessary for districts like yours to come into compliance. One of the key aspects of the regulation is that if you are to use that compliance schedule, you have to submit a compliance plan. And this is similar to the previous Senate bill before. It's a informed paperwork exercise, I would suggest, that describes, the water system's plans to come into compliance. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you a very high-level overview of options that water systems can use to comply with the MCL. And recalling your concentrations of chromium-6 above 10 micrograms per liter, they're not more than really double, and they're pretty typical of many California water systems with chromium above 10. So the options for compliance, the primary ones are, first, try to avoid treatment. And then there's 3 primarily identified treatments: strong base anion exchange, weak base anion exchange, and reduction coagulation filtration. If you click next, there are other options. Reverse osmosis, biological reduction filtration. There are some absorbent and reductive materials. And the one that's gotten a lot of conversation, which I've and our team has spoke about a lot and focused research on, is conversion of hexavalent chromium to trivalent chromium and using a chemical called stannous chloride. Next slide describes non-treatment options. And this is no different than dealing with any other contaminants. And those are, I think maybe one more. Should be we highlighted them. There, that was nice. The non-treatment options are blending. So there might be possibilities to bring multiple well supplies, and several of your supplies are already, proximal to one another. If there are ways to put those together to blend the concentrations reliably less than 10, always a great first option. There are also hydrogeologic opportunities to limit vertical portions of groundwater wells to decrease concentrations of specific contaminants. We have seen that successful for a number of contaminants, including chromium, as well as arsenic, uranium, nitrate. But it comes with the downside of losing some production capacity. Last, and certainly always the last option, is source abandonment. And this is one of the big challenges of this MCL. There are a number of well supplies that will be difficult to implement treatment, whether it's water quality conditions, site constraints, or cost. And we don't want to leave water districts with stranded assets like chromium impacted groundwater wells. These last few slides are just going to be some pictures of other treatment options to give you some sense of what these things look like, and I can talk about what they are. So for strong base anion exchange, you have both regenerable systems like shown on the left, non-regenerable systems like shown on the right. Now, these two systems, we were the leads on helping identify these solutions. On the left was for Soquel Creek Water District. That happens to be the very first permitted strong base anion exchange regenerable system for chromium treatment. And that was back in 2014. Those systems are very similar to what India Water Authority implemented years ago and are still operating. And those are also implemented by California Water Service at several locations. That does produce a hazardous waste that is a liquid that requires disposal or treatment. And so there's both cost and operational concerns with that, which is why non-regenerable strong base anion exchange, shown on the right, which is just the tanks with the resin inside of it, pass the water through it. And then once that resin is saturated with chromium, you physically remove it and you dispose of it, or you can have somebody else regenerate it and put it back into service. And we've found ways to make that much more effective today than we thought a decade ago. The next slide
shifts to the next predominant treatment approach, which we believe will be widely adopted in the state. And actually, the state Division of Drinking Water thinks this too, if you look at their economic analysis, and that's reduction, coagulation, filtration. And this photo is of the California Water Service Las Lomas Well 305 system, which was the first and still only full-scale permitted reduction, coagulation, filtration treatment system for hexavalent chromium. And we led that effort for California Water Service, like 8+ years ago, because they already had this oxidation filtration system. And the prospect of adding a strong base anion exchange system to it was not going to be feasible. And so, very long story short, literally we have half-hour to hour-long presentations on this detail alone. We figured out how to inform some of the chemical details to allow this process to work in a very, very small footprint. So you add ferrous iron to reduce chromium-6 to chromium-3. You filter it out. After a little bit of chlorine is added, those filters are backwashed. Generally, the backwash water goes directly to a sewer system or can be captured. The backwash solid can be captured and the water can be recycled. And this has been by far and away the operator's preference for the most simple, and it is typically one of the lower cost options. Now, the next and last kind of picture slide is for the last subject, which is conversion from chromium-6 to chromium-3 with stannous chloride. And I show you a number of pictures. Top left, that was the first pilot testing using filtration in Watsonville, California. Bottom left was using bag filters in Soquel Creek Water District. And then top right was the effort we led for the full-scale demonstration for Coachella Valley Water District in the Sky Valley system. And the bottom right was actually the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's research in the either the Joshua Basin area or Norman, Oklahoma. I'm trying to recall the specifics. And the good thing about stannous chloride is that it can effectively reduce chromium-6 to chromium-3. And we have demonstrated that it can keep chromium-6 concentrations below 10 micrograms per liter in typical water distribution system environments, even when you have chlorine. Suffice to say, the chemistry is complicated and you have a little bit of a push and pull between chromium-6 and chromium-3 when you add chlorine to that system. The bottom right picture, though, of that pipe is why we are continuing additional research on this subject. And that is when we add stannous, which is tin, to the water, and then we measure tin and chromium through the distribution system, we have had problems finding all of the tin and chromium at the end of the system. It should be conservative, but in most cases it has not been. And so that means that those things are building up in your water distribution system somewhere. And this is actually a picture of where we saw some physical evidence of white tin solids, presumably with high concentrations of chromium with it as well. And so we're actively working on trying to answer the research questions about if that could be an effective method. We're doing that with others in your area. We're doing that work with California Water Service, and we've got efforts underway to inform that for districts like yourself, as well as the state of California. So the next slide gets to, well, where do you go from here? First and foremost, you have to follow the regulatory process and those outcomes. And as a subtext to that, we do expect that, like previously, there will be litigation against the state for whatever MCL comes out. However, in this case, I don't expect it to be successful like it was before. And now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an environmental engineer that just followed the path of this very long saga over 2 decades now. But I do think that this MCL will withstand legal challenge. That then means you need to have monitoring in place. You need to develop a compliance plan, and you need to study to assess the ways that you will address this compliance challenge for the wells that are impacted in your district. And once that's known, you got to get to work to implement it. And that's what we will address and help set that plan and course forward. So with that, glad to discuss any questions. There's a lot of additional background behind this, and I know that there will be more opportunity for that as well as we go forward.
Yeah, quick question. I have a couple of questions. Until the state makes a decision on the level of Chrome 6 in the water, what's permissible, we are under the guidelines of the federal standard. Is that correct? I
That
can't
is
hear you.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And the federal standard is what again?
Well, so there's two standards. There's the federal total microgram or total chromium concentration standard, which is 100 micrograms per liter, but there is a California state specific total chromium MCL of 50. So that is the most constraining requirement now. So every one of your well supplies is compliant with the current regulation of less than 50 micrograms per liter of total chromium.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize that part of your presentation that we're currently in compliance.
Absolutely.
And, well, anybody else? Ted, do you have any questions or comments?
I appreciate the time you take on this and your presentation. One of the first things I did when I became a director here is I study environmental horticulture, and I was fascinated by this chromium-6, how it's throughout California and where it actually comes from here in our area. And I really appreciate your knowledge on this, and it's wonderful. One of the things I did come across was how sugar will turn chromium-6 into chromium-3, and I was wondering if that's why our bodies, is that what was going on in our bodies. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more from you in the future, and I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Ivan?
Yeah, I guess one quick question would be, we're currently working on our financial master plan, and is it possible to get some kind of ballpark figures of what these different treatments would cost for those main wells that we have over that limit, should it be changed to 10? And then I guess just another question would be, for our end users, if, say, they're concerned about the levels, is chromium-6 something like a standard Brita filter in your refrigerator? Does that filter out the chromium-6?
Great questions. The question about cost, I do believe, will be an expected outcome of those very early next steps, because it needs to be answered by what's the approach, what are their site-specific constraints, and then how will those be implemented and operated. So that should be forthcoming. The question about how can these things be addressed at home, there are some home water treatment devices that can be used for that. NSF certified devices will be listed for removal of that, and those can be identified with the National Sanitation Foundation devices. But I will reiterate, under the current environment, all of the well supplies that you have are in compliance with state and federal requirements, and any changes that will come will be associated with a compliance schedule to come into place. It's not an immediate acute risk. It's a long-term carcinogenic risk that the state is trying to address with this regulation.
Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, I kind of want to comment on Ivan. So, and Director Jeff Bowman is here from Desert Water Agency. They had a presentation the last meeting, and they listed some costs based on 2018 studies that they did. And it was, I believe, well over $1 million per well initially, with ongoing costs. And I didn't bring my notes, which was stupid of me. I was in a rush. I think it was like over 70 million system wide for DWA, and an end user cost of about $3,200 per connection. So I know that the reason that the previous standard was struck down was because of the costs, and that there was no funding. My understanding is that there will be funding, which is why it probably will not get struck down again, and so we would hopefully qualify for that as a disadvantaged community. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I did have a question, and I just kind of lost it. So I guess obviously it's not that important. That's it.
Okay, Amber?
Thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more conversations regarding this issue in the near future. One of the things that you had noted in your presentation was that California's own environmental group, the OEHHA, was encouraging and pushing for that 0.02 parts per billion as the health goal, or potentially 3. With your level of a hold on the temperature of these things, do you see the proposal changing for the lesser of 10, or do you see that as being the definite move forward point as put forth in the state right now?
It's a very good question. So I'll try to answer it in two specific ways because there's some communication questions that come up. So with the public health goal being 0.02 parts per billion hexavalent chromium, but the MCL proposal being 10, there's clearly a discrepancy there. And usually it's important to note that the state is accounting for the economic feasibility in choosing a MCL that's higher than the public health goal. And in the draft MCL information, the state clearly states that MCL conditions less than 10 micrograms per liter are deemed to be economically infeasible. So there is not presently a concern that the proposal will come out as final at a lower concentration. Now, I would want to draw a parallel, though, to other contaminants that are regulated. One of the simplest to describe is arsenic. So arsenic has a federal and state maximum contaminant level of 10 micrograms per liter. It has a WEHA public health goal of 0.004 micrograms per liter, so even lower. And that MCL has been in place with California for almost 20 years now. Now, California is now considering perhaps lowering it from 10 to something lower than that. But that's after years of research and implementation and learning about how better to address it and how to perhaps make it economically feasible. And so that's maybe on the long-term horizon, it could be possible, but I don't expect that on the short-term horizon. Was that clear?
Yes, thank you for that. I was reading an article a couple days ago regarding some of the public comment meetings that were taking place, and the article kept mentioning the fact that they were going against the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment that was put forth by their own state organization. So it was making me concerned in regards to the possibility of that changing moving forward. So thank you for that information. Also, in regards to Vice President Sewell's comments regarding filtering, my research has indicated that it's reverse osmosis or some very few fairly costly at-home filtering units that will remove chromium-6. You kind of didn't want to say in particular one way or another, and we're not asking for you to give a recommendation or to promote any company over the other, but could you clarify what home devices, what types of home filtration devices would work?
Yeah, happy to. So the categories of treatment devices do include under sink mounted reverse osmosis systems and some of the cartridge based systems that use a mixture of ion exchange and granular activated carbon. They are manufactured and provided and certified for a wide array of companies that can provide those. And actually, the proposed MCL rule package information has a section describing the use of point of use and point of entry devices, which is that category of treatment systems. And so those can be referenced immediately. And if it is a specific detail that the district wants more information, we're glad to pull together and provide more of that.
Thank you so much. And then the very last thing, again, in my research, aside from the naturally occurring, they said one of the largest producers of the Chrome-6 pollutant into our water systems is the electronic transformer power stations, because they use it to cool their transformers. Have we had any research in our area in regards to the power plant that sits above our groundwater and the effect that may have had?
So there have been a number of research efforts trying to identify the source of chromium throughout the Coachella Valley and frankly through lots of California groundwater supplies. And there are some places that are specifically researched with the, I guess, more industrial contamination. And there's places where they're trying to focus on the difference between industrial contamination, like what you described, compared with naturally occurring. In the Coachella Valley, and this is, I wouldn't say this is a professional opinion because I'm not a hydrogeologist, but what I have read in that literature is that there can be difficulties in discerning the difference between the naturally occurring and the industrial sourced chromium. Not to say that there isn't more detail there is, but it's in a lot of very detailed research studies, a lot by the USGS and some others that have been involved with the State Water Resources Control Board's efforts over the years. Places with known industrial contamination with chromium-6 include much of the San Fernando Valley, Burbank, Glendale, San Fernando area, and then clearly some of the areas that were impacted in the Aaron Brockovich case in particular. Again, other things that can be provided as background with some of the research materials that have answered that question to some extent.
Thank you so much for all this information. We look forward to more talking with you soon.
Yeah, and I have one or two questions left as well. Are there any other states that you're aware of that have set the standard of 10 parts per billion?
No other states. Well, it's actually a little bit of a perplexing answer because, for example, the state of Texas used some of the other research to substantiate the need to not regulate further. New Jersey has had efforts underway to perhaps implement a state-specific hexavalent chromium MCL. There's a number of industrial contaminated sites with hexavalent chromium in New Jersey. And then outside of that, the other place that has, maybe close to the same degree of chromium occurrence in their groundwater supplies as California is Oklahoma. And that's pretty well understood to be naturally occurring, but Oklahoma has not made efforts to do anything beyond the national regulation. Now, it is important to note that EPA in their most recent review of the IRIS, their risk review process, have noted perhaps they will view chromium as a carcinogen via ingestion. And if that does play out, which could take, they're on a pretty slow schedule for that, there could be a change of the federal standard. But I don't expect that would be something that would be more stringent than what California is contemplating right now. But that is speculative at this point. There's no firm evidence to go beyond a speculation.
So to sum up my question on there, so that every other state and authority on the subject has said that currently 100 parts per billion is safe drinking water for their population. If it wasn't, I'm sure they would take action on it. But is that a fair statement to say?
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. The degree to which there's differing opinions on that still is fair. It's just that other regulatory bodies haven't taken action like the state of California has taken so far.
Okay. Any questions or comments from staff?
No, not at this time.
Yeah, all right. Any questions or comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none. Anything further on this, on your presentation? I guess not.
No, not at this time. No,
Okay.
Again, I appreciate you accommodating the time for me to be able to connect given other constraints today, and very much look forward to supporting your needs and efforts there and answering the questions as they come up.
Well, thank you. You gave a very excellent presentation, and despite the technical difficulties, it was very informative. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll look forward to doing it in person. Much more reliable and effective.
And we do too.
Indeed, indeed.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. I will. I'll sign off now and let you continue with your agenda and look forward
Okay.
to the next time to connect. Thank you all.
Okay, moving on to item 5, strategic plan consultant submittals, presentations, and possible selection. Brian, you want to make the introduction?
I was going to say, Marion's prepared a couple of slides to go over.
All right, Marion?
Good afternoon, President Martin and members of the board. I just wanted to give a quick update. We did go out for a request for proposal last July, and we got those responses back about a month and a half ago. We've scored them internally, and today we wanted to give you an opportunity to interview and discuss this with the top 3 vendors, which we do have 2 here in attendance in person and 1 that should be online. Do you want to go ahead and put the slides up? Down the bottom. So go to the second slide, please. As I said, we did issue that back in June 14th. We closed at the July 14th. We've scored it. The top 3 bidders have been invited to present. Hopefully, we've asked them to prepare about a 5-minute presentation for you and leave you at least 5 minutes for Q&A. And then we would leave that up to the board for discussion and then further direction to staff. Next slide, please. I did want to point out a few of the common themes from each of the proposals. All 3 of the bidders have experience working with Mission Springs Water District here in the and other water districts within the Coachella Valley, and also strategic planning experience. All of them did advocate some variation of a SWOT, or strengths, weakness, opportunity, and threats analysis. All of them did indicate that this would be, board-driven with staff involvement and some component of community engagement. But each of those different proposals, as were in your packet, do vary in those different amounts. Also, I wanted to draw your attention to the timeline. 2 of the vendors were very similar in their timeline, and 1 was a little bit more aggressive. So just wanted to draw those things to your attention. I'm sure you guys looked through the proposals and had some other additional thoughts.
I believe there might be a typo on the Woodward timeline. From what I got was 18 weeks. Page 143, they have their kind of timeline. And there's 2 weeks, 4 weeks between each of these steps.
Oh, so I may have typed. I'm so apology. So thank you, Ivan.
I think the timelines are all pretty much nearly
Similar.
identical.
Very good. Okay. And with that, I will go ahead and open it up.
Okay.
Did Ref tell us everything online? Okay. And so we'll start with Ref Telus.
Okay.
Raftellus has opted to go last. CV Strategies is going first.
Great.
Then Woodward and Raftellus last.
And in another twist of things, I'm actually going to hand you some things.
In-person meetings, I love them.
Right?
Yeah,
So I'm going to
thank
give you
you.
guys each kind of a different style of strategic plan to show that no strategic plan is, or in our opinion should be, the same. They're even extra ones. So thank you so much for having me here today. I really am excited to answer any questions you might have, describe a little bit about us. I know you know us really, really well, but
wanting to talk a little bit more about our strategic planning experience. We have done strategic planning for the last 7 to 10 years for different water districts of different sizes, shapes, and needs. Sometimes we want something that's a little bit more community focused. Sometimes we're looking for something that's really technically detailed. And sometimes we're looking for pulling an agency together and really sharing a vision. So that's something that we help facilitate and have a long history of doing so successfully across the state of California. We understand the intricacies of your system. We know the partners you're playing with, and also the systems that you have and the projects you have in place. So we're super excited to, again, answer any questions you might have. And in fact, we're working right now with San Antonio Pass on their strategic plan, which is right next door. So really excited to see how we can help you with this process. I know you guys have probably reviewed our RFP to death. You know that this is the setup that we have. And so I didn't want to waste any time with anything that was already in our RFP.
Okay. Stay up there for questions, okay?
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
Right,
This is your time.
Amber?
Thank you so much for providing all of the details in your RFP and for being here to answer questions. We really appreciate that. I noted that you have a lot of local clients and you're very, very familiar with our valley. And I did like the fact that we would be served from your Palm Desert office, which is nice to know that they're going to be local people with very minimal travel costs. But one thing that I did note that was different from the others is that you projected your cost at 35 versus setting the cost at 35,000. Is the 35,000?
That's a not to exceed.
Not to exceed. That's what I was
So,
looking for.
yeah, we like to only charge you exactly what time you use. So if it doesn't require $35,000 worth of time, then we're not going to charge you $35,000 worth of time.
Now,
Especially because we have all the experience here. There's a lot that we can kind of leverage. So we wanted to show you what we normally charge for a strategic planning process. And then if we can kind of cut that down because of the familiarity we have, we're happy to do so.
And what if we need more than just one board workshop or one board meeting with you, or you need an additional meeting with community than you had originally planned? Are you going to include that or provide a change order?
We'll absolutely include it. You guys are just down the street. There's no, I mean, it's like, what, an extra hour? I don't need a change order for an hour.
Thank you. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Nothing further from me. Thank you.
Robert?
I had no questions. I get
Ted?
No, thank you for coming.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here all the time.
That's it? Okay.
I'm not sure if you've had a chance to possibly thumb through your competitors' proposals, but I just see the cost difference so far from the other two, where they're very similar. It seems like they have more community and possibly employee engagement. Is that something, should we choose you, that we could add on? I feel like there's room for us to possibly increase the budget if we wanted to kind of get to what the other two are proposing.
So one of the things that we sometimes recommend, and that's something that we would look at during the strategic planning process, is a polling, and that would be an external person. We don't internally poll strategic or statistically relevant because we're not a polling company, and there are polling companies who are very, very good at that process, and we like the unbiased feel of having a polling company that is separate from ourselves, right? If we're polling and we're going like, we're you guys, basically, we want to pull you guys together, then if we're also the polling, that will likely bias the information. It'll bias the questionnaire, it'll bias all of those pieces that we may want the information from, but they're going to ask it in a way that's completely unbiased and get to the heart of those things. And we would potentially recommend a polling piece, and that would be a separate contract with a separate polling company. We would help you with the RFP process for that. In addition, if we wanted to do additional focus groups, like I said, no additional cost. It would just be something that we'd explore together as a possibility, and we're happy to include additional community members. My focus at the very beginning is with what your guys' needs are, and we'll do a needs assessment right off the bat to figure out where we are in terms of staff understanding of what's happening, where we are in terms of the board vision, where we are is the most important step of this whole process. That first meeting where we sit down, we make eye-to-eye contact, we figure out where you stand, what information you need, what information you're seeking. You know, if there's a community survey that was already done like a week ago, I don't want to charge it. I don't want to be like, here's another community survey that we need. And we want to make sure that we're using money wisely and we're really getting to the heart of the vision of the board and then helping staff understand what next steps you want to see put into place.
So I guess my only request would be, are you able to provide like a ballpark figure of what that polling would be for the community kind of engagement? Just so when we make this decision at our board meeting, we can really kind of compare apples to apples.
Absolutely. So if we were to do like a Survey Monkey polling where it's not statistically relevant, there are barriers to entry, that would be at no additional charge. If we were to do, again with the focus group, all of that would be no additional charge. If we were to go with a statistically, like one of those polling companies, they're usually between 15 and 20,000.
Okay.
We use them. I mean, it's Adam Probolski. You probably have the old quote. So.
And that's included with the Woodward proposal. So, all right, thank you.
There you go.
I have
You
just,
have questions.
Yeah, it was not a question, more of a comment. I don't recall a time since I've been here that Mission Springs Water District has received the recognition for our public outreach, community outreach programs, to winning honors from the state and I believe nationally too. Is that correct, Marion? Or state. It's throughout the state, and we were the only ones recognized for that. And while Marion deserves the lion's share of the credit, CV Strategies played a major role in that as well. So I just wanted to make that make the board aware of that fact, that we were very much pleased with the honors we received most recently. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, Dan?
One more thing I had meant to ask/comment on. Given the familiarity you have with our district, do you feel confident you're going to be able to say the things we may not want to hear and tell us the things we may not really like because we need to hear them? Or could there potentially be some concerns that you may have about being able to be forthright given the close relationship that we have?
So it's interesting you should say that. If you notice, today Sean is not here. And that was a very strategic move on my part. I know how close Sean and Marion are. I know Sean's been serving you for the last 4 years. And I'm happy to tell you what I think is not working. All day, every day.
Thank you. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Okay, bear with me just a second here. Dory told me I had to control the whole thing. Okay. There's a USB here. Before I break something, if you could. Thank you. Great. And then I'll share from here, from Zoom?
From Zoom? Yeah.
Okay. Everybody seeing the whole thing, not my notes page? Okay, just checking. Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today to talk about your strategic plan. My name is Katie Evans, and I'm with Woodard & Kern. I'm the Senior Communication Strategist for Woodard & Kern. I do know a lot of you, but for those who I haven't met before, I've been with Woodard & Kern about 1.5 years, and I've been working with Mission Springs in that consulting role through the Integrated Regional Water Management Planning effort and through some grant support. But prior to coming to Woodard & Kern, I worked as agency staff in the Coachella Valley for Desert Water Agency and Coachella Valley Water District for about 15 years. Most recently as Director of Communications and Conservation at CVWD. So I've actually been working with Mission Springs since about 2008. I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about your strategic plan and in good company with both CV Strategies and Raftellus. So thanks for having me. No. Okay, there we go. I think it's fine. Okay, so there are a lot of things that make a good strategic plan. If you asked a bunch of people, you'd get a bunch of different answers, but there are 3 that we've really identified as being critical to the success of a good strategic plan. The first is that it's customized. You do not want to have a cookie cutter strategic plan. You want something that's really special to your district. And in order to do that, you really need to have an understanding of what's going on around here. Local nuances, information about the district, what's happening with state and federal regulations, how are we interacting with land use agencies, how do we incorporate the city. There's a lot of different moving parts in understanding exactly what Mission Springs needs and then customizing a plan to the district. Secondly, we think it's really important for a strategic plan to express the viewpoints of the community, your employees, and the board. So we want to make sure we've got everybody's viewpoint involved, and we want to make sure that to have something successful, we've got buy-in from all 3 groups. And lastly, and I think most importantly to me, you need an implementable strategic plan. You want something that the staff can take action from, that will not just sit on a shelf, but instead will be something that they can use to guide their day-to-day actions. There we go. And so I think our team is uniquely qualified to provide this. As I mentioned, I've worked in water in the Coachella Valley for 15 years. I'm now working on water projects across the country. My partner in this effort is Hector Bordas, and Hector has a great deal of experience in water around the country as well. And something that I think that Woodard & Kern does really, really well, I think something about our firm, is that we marry the technical expertise with this sort of political communications outreach component of the business. Hector and I will be here. We'll be leading the charge on facilitating and stakeholders and all that part. But behind us will be exactly 1,000 technical experts on every aspect of water resources that there is, from stormwater to water quality to everything in between. So we have a great deal of expertise to bring to the table to make sure that we've got a plan that really works. Secondly, our facilitation skills are very strong. I'm a certified facilitator. Hector does a whole lot of this. And we have brought in Adam Probolski. So the intention there was that we want to do some polling. We want to really understand what the community thinks, and we want to have everyone involved. You also saw in our proposal, I'm sure, that we have an employee workshop as well to make sure we get their feedback too. So we're really going to be diligent about making sure that we've got all these different viewpoints as part of the process. And lastly, and again, where I said I think it's most important, is this implementability component. I have had to implement a strategic plan as a staff member of a water agency. I have been tasked with that to do. I have been evaluated in my annual eval on how well I'm implementing the strategic plan. Hector has been, prior to coming to Woodard & Kern, Hector spent 30 years with Los Angeles County and was most recently Deputy Director of Public Works. So the 2 of us really understand what it's like to be on that side of the table as well. We've done both, and we know that both parts need equal consideration and they need to work together. I think a really good example of where we did that well recently was with Camarosa Water District. We did a strategic plan with Camarosa, and their board had some really good big ideas, specifically about outreach, that the staff just could not do. They just didn't have the resources. And so we created an appendix to their strategic plan that was a staff resourcing guide. So we were able to say, okay, if you do this, staff can do it. If you want to do this, you're going to have to reassign some staff. if you want to do this, you're going to need to hire some people. And so putting that guide together really helped them understand how they could implement it. And I think that's something that can really go a long way in keeping it from being something that's collecting dust on a shelf. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to get you to is something that the staff can take, and every day that they do their work, they can do it with your mission and vision in mind. There we go. So I wrote up a little example of this from Mission Springs past to just show you what I mean about the process. So hypothetically, let's say that during our first workshop, during our mission, vision, and values, the board defines a value as groundwater quality protection. And then during our SWOT analysis, and complemented by things we're hearing from the public and conversations with stakeholders, we determined that septic tanks are a threat to that value. Then we would write a SMART goal. You can see I wrote one here that tells staff specifically what they should be doing, what actions they should be taking to protect that value. And then the staff has action steps to move forward. So again, this is an example that seems pretty obvious, but I wanted to show you how we intend to move our way through the process. And I think with that, I was going to point out, thank you for pointing out our schedule is, that was weeks between. So you can see on this one, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks, and then 4 weeks again. We are open to changing this. We put space in between those so that you would have time to think and digest and maybe even do a little homework. But we're open to changing that as needed. And again, thanks so much for having me today. I'm so happy to be here. It's so nice to see all of you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Ted?
I get to go first again, huh?
Yeah, well, I went back there first. Yeah, I'm going back and forth.
Are you? Okay.
Age before beauty.
All right. I agree with that. Yeah.
That's why I'm last.
You should be first.
You bring up a lot of good points there.
Thank you.
And what was your cost going to be on this?
I think we're around 88,000.
88,000. Okay. And you're coming all the way from Arizona?
Yeah, so travel costs are incorporated, and I was anticipating that question, so I will answer it. We generally work with two options at Woodard and Kern, so we can we either bill travel from the closest Woodard and Kern office, or if it's cheaper to do it a different way, we can do it a different way. I will tell you, as I come here a lot, flights from Phoenix to Palm Springs are sometimes quite a bit cheaper than the mileage from the nearest Woodard and Kern office. So our nearest office is San Diego, and we can bill based on what is either San Diego or Phoenix and what turns out to be cheaper.
And what if we don't need all these different aspects that you're giving us? Well, can we
Yes.
get you for less than the 80?
Yeah, so our contract is also a not to exceed. So 88,000 is what we came up with for everything. And if we are able to find efficiencies or there are things that you'd like to remove from the scope and the approach, certainly we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
No questions, just a great presentation, and I really like the emphasis on setting the staff up to be able to implement whatever we figure out. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amber?
Also, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. It was nice to meet you today. I haven't had the opportunity. Trying to figure out how to word my question here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Just spit it out, right? Being on the higher end of our responses here, how familiar are you with working through this process while we're also going through a financial strategic plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So we actually do that quite a bit. One of the things that's really, really common, maybe it's a specialty of ours, is multiple planning efforts at once. So I'll use Camrosa again as a quick example. So with Camrosa, they actually brought us in to write them a scope. So first we had phase one where we wrote a scope. And in that scope, we were like, you're going to need a strategic plan. You're going to need a water use master plan, and then you're going to need a capital improvement plan that has money tied to it, right? Budgeting tied to it. And so we were able to do all those plans together simultaneously and interact them with one another. So it's actually something we do really commonly. We just won a contract with Alameda County Water District to do the same thing. So we're starting with this sort of very broad scope of we need to do some planning and we need to make some choices, and we're gonna kind of following a similar approach. We're doing a big stakeholder push, we're doing some polling, and then we're going to hone in on what plans do we need and what do we need to be working on and how do we tie, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone wants to know how we tie rates and budget into all the things we want to do, because of course, we're all limited with what resources we have available to us. So simultaneous planning is actually something we do quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Laura?
I'm going to piggyback on that.
Sure.
The financial plan is actually being done by another company. You integrate with them.
Who is it?
It's with Reftelis.
Oh, great. Yeah, we work with Reftelis all the time. When I came up and said good company, I was really happy because we work with CV Strategies and Reftelis all the time on a number of projects, and I can't say enough great things about either firm. So yeah, we work with Reftelis on several other things, and we could certainly coordinate with them on that.
So I like the fact we have you guys are very local in terms of your knowledge, but I have to say this first. On page 139, what really struck me, I've not studied these like I usually do, where I've spent like 4 days going over every detail, because I haven't had time. But I did scan them, and so under task 2, the second paragraph, which it just kind of struck me. We believe that conducting research in the language most comfortable to respondents is critical in obtaining accurate results. And I really was impressed by that because we are obviously a multicultural community as well as a disadvantaged one. So it speaks to me that you understand the importance of reaching out, not just in English. And I know it's very common for us white people to just automatically throw everything out there in English, but that's not what our demographic is. So I appreciated that. In terms of, so we have the not to exceed, we did ask about having multiple meetings and would that cost extra, and I'm assuming that's in how many meetings, for example, how many board member meetings had you planned on it during this? It says meet with the board, but it doesn't say how many times.
Sorry, my presentation went away, so let me pull it up, the work plan. There we go. Oh, you're not seeing it, sorry. So the board, we anticipate having the board at each of these meetings, but let me go through them one by one. I'm sorry, okay. So the first one, the first thing that we're gonna do in this assemble team is really gonna be a discussion with whoever you appoint. I mean, I assume we're gonna have conversations with Brian, and this is not necessarily a meeting so much as a conversation about who do we need on this team, right? We're gonna brainstorm who from staff, are there stakeholders? Is it just board? Who's on our team? And put that together. The kickoff session is very much a board heavy workshop. I would say this one more than any other session is really diving in deep with the board. How do you feel about these things? What is your vision? How do we get you there? So we'll facilitate a pretty solid workshop there with the board and then key staff from the district. The survey and survey work, we won't have you be a part of, obviously, because we won't be collecting everyone, but we'll want your input on the survey itself. We'll want to show you the questions. We'll want to talk to you about what we're going to be polling. And so you'll have some feedback before we do the survey. The SWOT analysis, again, is going to be a board workshop. So we'll have the board together with whatever key staff are involved. At this point, we may shift up our team a bit as far as who on the Mission Springs side is coming in. So if we're starting to identify some values related to water quality and we don't have a water quality person on our team, we may ask Brian, can you please bring somebody in? And so we may see some shifting there. The employee and engagement feedback workshop is an opportunity for us to kind of share everything with the employees, all of the employees. Here's where we're at. This is the vision we've identified. These are the things that we're working toward, and let employees give us feedback. I tend to believe that these are best done when board leadership facilitates instead of me. I will do it if you'd like, but I do tend to find that when district leadership's involved, there tends to be a better discussion. So we can talk about that, but I would anticipate or expect that the board would be a part of it. And then our finalization is really board heavy again. So really the two bookended meetings are very board heavy. Everything in between, we would expect board participation, but those two meetings are the most critical for really in-depth board participation.
Final question. So we know what your not to exceed is. In the past, when you've done this, how close to that have you come?
So, I mean, I can just tell you, as far as a project manager, I have not had a Coachella Valley project get anywhere near its not to exceed number yet. But as far as strategic planning, we've stayed very close to that. Some of our really, really big strategic plans, we're pushing right up against it. But so far in my work in the Coachella Valley, we've been able to find efficiencies because there is a lot of efficiency to be had when we can streamline things or combine things or work together. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
I don't have anything. As an excellent presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. And we have one presentation remote.
Correct. Raf Tillis will be next.
Okay.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I assume everybody can hear me.
No, you're going to have to speak up a little louder, get closer to the mic, or.
We can control that from here, I believe.
Okay.
Kurt, did you increase the volume?
I did.
Okay. Everyone able to hear me at this point?
It's a little better. Can you sit maybe closer to the microphone, or?
Yeah, and I will also try to
That's
up
better.
on my end as well. Okay.
That's better.
Great. Well, I'll try to project. So thank you. My name is Catherine Carter, and I'm a senior manager at Raf Tillis. If selected, I would be the project manager for this engagement. You know, I've at this point been with Raf Tillis for about 13 years, and over the course of that time, I have been involved with most of the strategic plans that we've done for utilities around the country. So really excited to be with you today. It sounds like you have a lot of great proposals to choose from, and we also are excited to be part of that company. So appreciate the opportunity to present with you today. I'll go pretty quickly, but I just wanted to go over some of the key points from our proposal. So give you a moment or give you a quick overview of Raf Tillis and kind of how we got to doing strategic plans as a major service line for our company. And then also talk a little bit about some of the work that we do with utilities around strategic planning, kind of how our approach has evolved over time to make sure that the plans that we're helping folks to put together really are implementable. They do capture the feedback from different stakeholder groups, and ultimately they help you to achieve the goals that you're looking for in your strategic plan. And I'll also spend just a few moments kind of talking through the scope that we've put together in response to your RFP. So I'll go ahead and start with the firm. So Raf Tillis was founded in 1993 to provide financial support for utilities in a variety of ways. Rates, kind of bond feasibility, that sort of work. Since that time, our services have expanded pretty considerably into management consulting kind of writ large. Everything from communication support right through technology implementation projects. Our firm is national, and we support hundreds of utilities every year in different contexts. And so specifically for strategic planning, I do want to talk just for a moment about the strategic planning services that we provide for utilities. To give you a sense of the sort of work that we do and the types of clients that we work with when we work with utilities, this is a selection of some of the utilities that we have done specifically strategic planning work for. And so as you can see, we have some of the largest utilities in the country that we've worked with. We also have small utilities, we have authorities, we have municipal organizations. We've really kind of seen all sorts of different approaches and all sorts of constraints and different operating contexts that utilities are working within. And so wanted to just highlight that a big part of our process is really understanding what it is that you all are facing in your utility here today, understanding your operating context as a way to then say, okay, let's look at some other organizations that have had similar experiences, similar constraints, that have similar opportunities, and really leverage what has worked for them in terms of strategic planning and bring that to bear for the district. We're well versed in the issues and challenges that utilities face, and based on the experience that we've had, we've really adjusted our approach over time to encapsulate some of the things that are working well for utilities in terms of how to engage folks, how to make sure that employees feel like they have a voice and a part of the process, how to engage the community and your other stakeholders to ensure that as you have common goals and as there are things that the utility is doing that impact folks outside of the utility, that everyone's on the same page and has that same level of buy-in that will help the organization to move forward and ultimately achieve those goals. So what we want to do is make sure that we're leveraging our experience and the experience of other similar organizations to bring that to you to make sure that the approach that we use with you all is one that will really work for your organization. As far as kind of our process and some of the tasks that we have laid out in our proposal, I do want to kind of highlight that our tasks and activities are really flexible. We have a pretty customizable approach. We want to talk to you at kind of every stage and make sure that what we're doing really meets your needs, even those that occur over the course of the project and might need to shift as a response to new information that we're learning. What we've proposed is to start with a series of kickoff and stakeholder engagement exercises. These might include things like interviews with the board, interviews with staff and leadership team members, focus groups, community engagement via online and in-person sessions, and looking for ways to make sure that we're meeting people where they are and give people an opportunity to participate in the process. Once we've gone through kind of the kickoff piece and the stakeholder engagement piece, we've proposed a retreat for the board and senior leadership to come and really use that information to start to form the basis of the strategic plan. When we think about strategic planning, we really think about it as the answer to 3 questions. So what is it that we know to be true today? What is it that we hope will be true in the future? And what are some of the things that we need to do to get us from where we are today to that desired future state? I know that the district has a history of strategic planning. I want to make sure that as we are moving through this strategic plan, we're taking stock of what's worked well and what's been challenging in the past and what needs to be incorporated into an approach that really helps us to implement this next strategic plan. And so all of those factors will be discussed and kind of hashed out during the retreat to make sure that we're incorporating the stakeholder input effectively, to make sure that as we're planning, we're creating things that are doable and implementable and that honor kind of what has worked really well for you all in the past. And then finally, once we have those kind of big categories of the strategic framework, so at the retreat, we'll work through vision, mission, values, kind of your goal areas, and then we'll take that information and work with staff to really spend some time further defining what are those specific activities that need to happen, what are the projects that need to happen that will help to move us forward towards our goals. Where are there gaps in terms of the work that's already ongoing and new work that might need to take place in order to close those gaps? And what are the metrics or performance measures that are going to help us know that we're making progress towards our goals? And so we'll work with staff to really define all of that, to come up with an implementation plan that will help to ensure that we have appropriate accountability, that you can see progress over time, that we're effectively reporting on the work that we're doing, and that we're sharing some of the successes as we move through the strategic planning process. And then the final stage of the plan, or of the planned approach rather, is to really work to develop high quality deliverables. When we do strategic planning, we think of it, we see some kind of key benefits from it as an activity. The first is obviously that anytime you get people together and start planning and start really looking at the resources that you have and what you're trying to achieve, things start to happen. And so you get a lot of value just from the process of strategic planning. But we also recognize that your strategic plan is ultimately a communication piece. It's a way to ensure alignment between your employees and the organization. It's a way to ensure that folks outside of the organization have a sense for what's important and what it is that you all are focused on so that you can start to identify some of those shared goals. And it's an important vehicle for being able to tell your story, to really share the value of the services that you all provide, and to kind of have a clearinghouse for these are the things that we're working on. These are the things that are most important for us as an organization. And to have that as a way to share both internally and externally. And so having high quality deliverables that really achieve all of those outcomes is very important to us and is something that we've gotten a lot of value from. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen for the moment, but I'm happy to bring up any slides and answer any questions that you have.
Okay, I'll start at the other end, Ted, if that's okay with you.
Well, I'm trying to insert her.
Amber?
Thank you so much for this presentation. Couple things. So you're going to be the point person for this project. If you're selected, you would be the person?
Yes, I'll be the point person, but we also have folks in our LA office who will be staffing the project. And we also have a visual facilitator who is a little bit north of LA.
Okay, so the majority of the people traveling to our site will be coming from LA.
Yes.
And are you in Ohio? Is that correct?
No, I'm actually in our Charlotte office.
Okay, okay. And then I had noticed on page, let me see if I can find it now. On page 67, you stated that, or your company stated that they reviewed Planet Bid and there were no addendums issued. But then under the exceptions, you guys redlined a lot of our contract. I don't know if our lawyer has had a chance to review that to see if there are issues with removing any of what they're proposing we remove. But is that a end all? If we were to say we're not going to remove any of that, will you still be willing to move forward, or does this is this a no-go if we don't remove the red line items?
This is not a no-go. We have our lawyers review every contract, and so want to at least raise it as a flag, but we anticipate that we're happy to have that conversation with you. It's certainly not a no-go at this point.
Okay. And then I believe your bid was 74,000, and that included polling. Obviously, I think it noted 21,000 for the stakeholder engagement, which I would assume includes the polling process. Is that true?
So yes, it is inclusive. We didn't specify a type of engagement at this point. We know that there are some communities for which polling works really, really well, and there are some communities for which in-person engagement or online platforms where folks have the opportunity to engage with each other work better for those communities. And so want to make sure that what we're proposing to do is something that you all are on board with and feel like is the best way to engage your community in this area. And so we can do large scale polling. We can also do community summits. We can also do kind of online virtual platforms where folks have the opportunity to engage with each other. But at this point, we wanted to have those conversations before saying what we would definitely do.
Sure.
And yes, it is an inclusive cost.
In my 3-year-old son's terms, what if we wanted all? Would that increase the cost if we were to want to do a portion of each of those things you just stated? Do we need to choose one according to this contract, or?
No, I don't think you would need to choose one. I think that we would want to talk to you about kind of the benefits, whether we would get different information from all of those types of engagement. So I think that would be the conversation. But no, we could certainly do some of all of them.
And then to kind of mirror the same questions we asked the other two, if we were to require more board meetings or more board involvement, do you see that raising the cost from the 74 that you've indicated here, or are you confident that will include all of it?
I'm pretty confident that will include all of it. Obviously, if there were some, major departure, I'm not sure what that would be, but at this point, I'm pretty confident in our estimate.
Thank you so much for your time and for the proposal. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Robert?
I'm piggyback because she always comes with good stuff. The redlining stuff. I was just kind of curious as to why.
And I will be honest, I'm not our corporate attorney.
Okay.
And so
So just so you know, at least in the beginning, the gist of it seems to be that everything is really your property, not ours, and so you get to use it however you like, as opposed to getting our permission, which is kind of what I took from this. And so that was what I was kind of curious is. So I know you included 2 examples of strategic plans, and is it because that you might want to use this for another opportunity or what? So I was just kind of curious about that.
I can't necessarily speak to the redlining, and I would want to review it in more depth, but I would say in practice, that would be the extent of our use of the products would be, you know, we often share deliverables as examples of what sorts of things other folks are talking about or how they're approaching specific issues, but I don't think that we would use them for any other context.
Well,
So
okay, that's kind of what I thought. And so I want to talk this strategic planning retreat. Tell me a little more about that.
Yep. So the way that we usually structure those is, and again, we would want to talk to you and make sure that the structure works, but going into the retreat, we would provide a preparation packet for everyone who is participating that includes all of the information that we've received from the sense of stakeholders and the environmental scanning that we have done prior to the retreat. So you'll get all materials in advance. We'll include the schedule, and this will go, typically when we do these retreats, it includes board members and the senior leadership team. And so it's a pretty collaborative experience. These are one day often. We will bring our visual facilitator and anticipate doing a lot of conversations, both as a full group and then breaking into small groups. And so as we build the strategic plan, as we have conversations over the course of the day, based on, again, the information that we've learned and, you know, your existing work, we will capture that visually. So you'll have a record of everything that we're talking about. We'll also take notes and issue you a full report after the retreat. But generally speaking, the way that the day sets up is that we'll first share some information with you. We'll go through and debrief the information that we've learned, the feedback that we've received, the input that we've gotten from the community. We'll spend some time looking at your existing strategic planning elements, your vision, your mission, your values. We'll spend, we'll go through to make sure that those are still representative of what the organization believes, and we'll make any tweaks that need to happen. From there, we'll spend time really looking at what it is that we expect will happen over the next 3 to 5 years. Do we have goals that fully kind of capture what it is that we expect and that pull our resources in the direction that we believe that they need to go in order to be successful? So we'll spend some time really looking at what our goals are and what the results are that we're hoping to achieve. And usually that takes, those activities take about the full day.
And is that located at the district, or is it somewhere like a hotel somewhere where, you know, if I got to spend a whole day with President Martin, I'm going to want a bar nearby. So I just kind of want to know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Some organizations choose to go offsite. Some organizations choose to do it in their boardroom. And so, you know, when we worked with Stockton East, we did the whole thing in their boardroom. They had a local restaurant bring in lunch. In some cases, like I said, folks choose to go offsite. It's really what you're interested in doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ivan.
Yeah, my only question was really more on cost.
Okay.
Your proposal definitely has, you know, each of those steps kind of itemized. Do you see us really being right at that 74, or do you see there's potential to be less?
I think that for most of the honestly, it might depend. It depends a little bit on the one that is always a little bit challenging is the stakeholder piece, and it depends on who and how much you want to engage. So the other tasks I feel very confident in, based on the conversation that we've had so far and kind of the conversation that I've heard you ask questions around, it's possible that that one has some flexibility, but it'll kind of depend on what it is that you all want to pursue in terms of that stakeholder engagement.
And do you see, if we were to do like a full-scale polling, is that the most expensive option, do you feel?
That would be one of the more expensive options. If you wanted to have several kind of community meetings and summits, that can also, I mean, that also takes some time and some arranging and that sort of thing. But yes, I would typically see the polling to be the most expensive part of that.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation.
Okay, Ted?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, taking the time.
Absolutely.
My question for you is, when you're saying employees input, are you referring to the management?
Not necessarily. Oftentimes we will do full staff surveys, or we will do focus groups that include different levels of the organization to make sure that everyone who is ultimately going to have some role in implementing parts of the strategic plan have the opportunity to provide some input into what that plan looks like. There are some organizations that do prefer to kind of cut it off at the leadership level, at least at this point in the process, but oftentimes we like to get as much input from employees as possible. And so we take a broader look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I have nothing more to add on this. I think there are a lot of good questions coming from the board today. So thank you for your time. It was an excellent presentation. Okay.
So President Martin, if I may, just to reiterate some things that Marion started with, we have worked with all three of these consultants, and thank each of you for making the presentations today. What we're asking from the board, as you know, this is somewhat unique. This strategic plan is your plan. It's something that's going to guide the organization and staff moving forward. That's why we wanted your input and why we thought typically we would be able to bring you a recommendation and we'd say this is what we want. But there are aspects of this, as we've talked about in this discussion, each one of them brings a new nuance to it, whether it be a retreat, whether it be a customer survey, things like that. We want your input. The staff is asking for, you can do a variety of things with your discussion as we move forward today. You can say, hey, I like this consultant, we'll go ahead and move forward. This is a professional services contract, so cost at this point isn't really the issue, it's more the qualifications and what their scope is. Once we define their scope and we start negotiating with them, then we'll get the cost back from that, and then we'll get legal involved and look at the markups. As you know, we've had one contract where someone said, hey, I have no comments. We started going through the process, we started negotiating, and we couldn't come to terms. So I appreciate that Reftelis has provided those. It will make that process a little bit easier on our end. So when you start going through these discussions, keep in mind, if you like one consultant, we can reach out to that one consultant and move forward. If you want to reach out to one, two, or all three regarding specific scope items that you'd like to see in all three, so we have an apples to apples comparison, we can do that. It's really your strategic plan. So from that perspective, go ahead, have a discussion, and just direct staff how you would like us to proceed. We can bring it back to you. Anything over $50,000 would have to come back. That's a little bit different because I'm an interim. Anything at 50 has to go to the board versus 75, which is typical. But from that perspective, we can bring something back, or you can direct us to move forward with one, so forth. So with that being said, please, if there's any questions for staff or amongst yourselves, please let us know.
Well, first of all, I liked all three presentations. I thought they were all excellent. And I don't like the idea of passing the buck, but I do want significant input from staff who has worked personally with these agencies and get their feedback, particularly Marion and yourself and anybody else that has had contact with them, to know what their experience, what your experience has been with these, because it's easy to make a really good presentation. It's to follow up and follow through on it, and you are in a better position to know that than we are. So with that, I'll Amber, do you have any comments? Or
like you, I agree. All three presentations were wonderful and unique in their own right. I personally want the time to be able to call. Each of them gave 3 or 4 water districts that they previously worked with, and I want to reach out to them. That's not something I can do here, obviously.
Yeah, no,
So I wouldn't be at a position to make a decision today
I'm not
to
either.
instruct staff, but I think that these 3 are definitely the ones that were right to be chosen to bring to us today. And I think that we just have to kind of digest the individuality of each of them. And like I said, I want to talk to those that have worked with them and get their feedback.
Okay, Robert?
I'm going to make a little suggestion. I think that we do have another board meeting in like a week and a half, and I think that that would be something that we might want to bring back at that time. There is a lot of information, and as I said, I didn't do my normal, scrutinizing every little thing. But even if I had, you get the presentations, you read this, you get the presentations, and this is such an important step because you have to get this right the first time. And this is what we're looking for, is to basically, we haven't had one in a long time, but it's to guide us and say this is what we need to do, and then our financial is going to be based on what our priorities are. And so I would like the time to digest more of this, so that then I can come back and say, okay, I understand, or this is what I'm leaning towards. So that's just my thing. It's not an easy decision. I didn't ask a lot of questions of you because I know CV strategies, and so it's, when you have someone talking that you've worked with their organization, you don't necessarily need to ask these questions because you've had the personal experience. Whereas the other two organizations, I've not had the personal experience. So, but you take this in, you write your little notes, which I did, and then I study this again, and so I would like to come back and have this as a discussion item and then move from that point. I think it gives us more time. So,
Yeah.
just
I
my
concur,
opinion.
yeah.
But, great presentations. I mean, honestly, really difficult choice. Very difficult choice.
That's why I'm passing the buck to staff.
If I may, President Martin, I would agree with Director Griffith that I think that by our upcoming board meeting, we would be able to make a
Yes.
decision. I just wanted to make sure you didn't think I needed more time than that.
Okay, no, that's more than enough time for me, and I gathered that from your presentation.
You don't need time. You're passing the buck, so.
Yeah, but I need time to meet with them to find out, see? That's what's time-consuming, meeting with people, Ted?
Yes, thank you for all the presentations. As I was talking with our interim general manager, Macy, here earlier before the meeting, and I was sharing with him that my thought on this is that I would like to know where the board is going with the strategic plan. That we get more of a general idea of what we want to do, and then see which one of these companies fits that general idea the best. For instance, do we really need to spend $20,000 to find out what the people in the city think of us, or our customers are thinking about us? Marion Champion has some of that information already with her social media statistics that she gives us, and it's not too good. So we already know we need to work on that without spending $20,000 to award a company that's looking at 88,000 or 70, and then work them down to 35,000 is very difficult to do. So I don't know if I'll be ready by next meeting to do this. Like I said, where are we going? One of the companies that came up with the sewer system, our septic tanks, and everything with water has to do with environmental issues. And there again, Brian and I were talking about that very situation. So we need to know, and we do need a game plan there, even if it's going to be a long-term game plan. So if the citizens know that we are working on environmental issues. So we have a lot of discussion and things that the board, I believe, needs to come up with, and a direction that the board would like to go with everything, and then come back to picking the company. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Robert?
So just my understanding, I have spoken to Brian and Marion about this, is it something like that, and something that I said was in terms of community engagement is, we may not need to go out and ask things like in terms service related. This is more of our plan, and if I'm wrong, let me know. But I believe where our goals are and what we're going to do is what we're going to determine while we work through that process. That would be part of our initial meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add before we go any further too, that when I first came to Desert Hot Springs, I was attending a lot of city council meetings. I've been attending them since 2007, and I believed initially that the voice of the community was expressed in the few that spoke out at city council meetings, thinking, boy, that, they don't like this particular item, or they don't like this particular plan. And I came to realize that that was totally false. You cannot rely on a handful of people to determine what the entire community feels. Now we've moved ahead with social media, and the same thing applies. A few people, some of which are challenged in a number of ways, who that speak out on social media are not necessarily representative of the community. So I disagree with your premise on that part of it, although I think that your other points are well taken. Ivan?
Yeah, I would just start by saying I hope we can make a decision at this coming board meeting. When we were given the information about the financial plan, Raftel has said, ideally we'd have a strategic plan done prior to a financial plan. So I think we're kind of behind the 8 ball. We need to get this started sooner than later. And I would just say, I'd like to see CV strategies include the polling and just have that, included in the bid. I think if we're going to do this, the more data we can have, and also include an all employees survey or something similar to the other two. I think the more data we have, the better. We're here to serve the people. We're here to have a good staff and employees. And I think the more information we can get from them will help our decisions be easier. But I commend staff. I think a grade 3 options, and it's going to be a tough choice. Thank you.
So, President Martin, if I may finish what I was going to say earlier. First of all, I agree with you partially. As Director Griffith being involved with the city government, and myself too, and we've been to some of these workshops, and you're absolutely right, President Martin. There's a certain people who will show up, and they don't represent everybody. But having a polling, calling people on the phone, what are we getting there? I think that we need to spend our $20,000 getting out there collectively and meeting the people in person is what we need to do, rather than to have a company come in. So I think that's all I'll say for now.
May I interject just into the conversation a little bit there? I agree with you, Director Meyerhoff, on a lot of what you've just said, but I do think that the ability we have to tell whoever we choose what type of things we want polled is up to us. So if we were to get through our process of identifying, once we sit down at the table, identifying what our priorities are, to then instruct the poll to go to the community to see if they agree, is totally different than giving them a satisfaction survey. I don't think any of us are necessarily wanting to spend $20,000 on a satisfaction survey. I agree. We can go out and talk to them. Customer service talks to our people every day. We know we have some problems. We know we have some strengths, and we need to work on that. However, I think that the only way for us to move forward in our community is to get the community involved. And so if they're allowed to have a say in how we're moving forward, however it is we facilitate that, I think it's very important. So again, I think if I'm understanding correctly, we as a board would set what that poll would be. I don't know if that helps your decision, but that's my understanding.
It puts a different little light on it, and I'm not sure what kind of questions you'd be asking them.
Well,
we're a water district, and
but let's say we wanted, I'm just going with one of the hypotheticals. Let's say one of our top priorities is the removal of the septic tanks. So one of our polling questions is, how important is it to you that we get all the septic tanks removed?
well, they're going to say no. It's going to cost them $25,000.
we need to know that.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? We need to know what their issues would be, and in order to know how we can move forward with them, because this isn't something we do against our public. This is something we're doing with them.
You see,
And that's my goal.
Okay, well, not to be argue with you, but at the same time, we just had a Nancy Wright treatment plant for millions of dollars built to hook everybody up to the septic tanks, and we got the grant money for that purpose. So I
Again,
don't understand that.
it was a completely hypothetical
Yes.
example because I can't delve into what.
Well,
may or may
we'll
not
go over all
agree on.
these. I'm willing to still be open-minded about it and hear what kind of questions we'll ask him later down the road. But for right now, I think President Martin wants to move forward with this.
Thank you.
Well, no, you all bring up some good points, and I think that there's some little bit of research on each of our parts, and not just what was presented today, and think about what was said. And I, for one, want staff involved in this decision. So with that, is there anything further from our general?
Yeah, just one point of clarification. It sounds like, since this is a professional contract and we will be able to negotiate scope and fee after we make the selection, the one thing that I heard as a consensus is that we wanted to check references. That is something that staff can do in the next week or so, and then bring that to the board for a discussion topic next week at either our study session or the following week at the board meeting, and then we can proceed at that point and get full board direction based on the references that we'll follow up on. So Mary and I will come up with a couple of questions. We'll reach out to the references that were provided or some of the lead projects that were discussed in each of the proposals, and we'll bring that back to the board next week. Thank you.
Sounds good. Anything else? Any comments or questions from the public? Or yes, Arturo.
Thank you, President Martin and members of the board. One question that I would ask the three companies that did the proposal.
Arturo, I can't hear you.
Thank you. One of the questions that I would ask before you make a decision, I think, is, as you know, these things, the goals and situations we find ourselves change every day. And so I think it's very important to have a plan that we can integrate and also change with the times and, with our goals and plans. And so I think it would be very important to have some sort of guidelines provided to the board as to, when every time to review it so that we can change with everything that's changing in the community and also with the state. They might finish the report and we have a plan, but the next day the state implements something that's going to cost a lot of money. We need a roadmap to navigate through something like that. And that's something that I haven't seen in any of our last several strategic planning performance. And so I think that's very important, that I personally think would save the district a lot of time and money, because then we can look at it every single quarter, every single year, and continue to grow with the district as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's why I wanted to.
Don't go. Don't go. May I, President Martin?
Sure, go ahead.
Can you just clarify so that it's a little bit easier for us, clarify specifically what you feel is missing?
The specifics as to what to do every quarter, every year, maybe look at it during the budget season, for staff to take the time and bring it back to the board. How do we do that? What are the ideas that we want to ask the board that we want to change, or do we basically keep the same plan for the next 5 years? The goals and the items in there are going to change from one year to the next.
The process for amending.
Correct.
Okay,
And
thank you.
and updating as things change.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, Ivan?
I love what you had to say, and I think that, a lot of times it seems like we say, oh, it's going to be a 5-year plan. And here we are 6 years from the last time. I don't know if it's a policy we put in place, but I'd love to see us revisit this, like you said, at least annually. But even to just have a new strategic plan every 4 years. It'd be nice. I mean, I see someone on our screen that's joining us, a past director. He went his whole term without any input into our strategic plan. So if it was every 4 years, it would guarantee every board member gets a say. I don't know if that's something we make a policy to visit, but I love the idea of constantly revisiting it and seeing if what we're implementing is working.
Correct, and that would be the question that I would ask the presenters is, or what kind of guidelines can you provide that makes us, helps us make that decision?
Thank you so much.
Okay, anything else? Marion, any comments you want to make? Good. Okay. With that, is there any comments either related to this subject or the previous, oh, yes, Tara?
Do you want us to answer the question about how we do those things?
I can't hear you.
We can't hear her on Zoom either. She should step to the podium.
So formal.
Would you like us to answer the question that Arturo just asked? Because I feel like all of us have that process, and I'm guessing that it would help the board make a decision on how we do it. That might actually help differentiate us even a little bit more.
Well, I would certainly appreciate your input. Yes, go ahead. Yep.
Just so we don't prolong this meeting any longer, let us, staff, do ask that question to each of the proposers and then get that response, as well as when we reach out for references and find out the follow-up process that each one of them did, and then we'll bring that to our next meeting.
Fabulous.
Okay, yeah, because the other, yeah, okay, sounds good. Any other comments from the directors concerning any issue we've discussed today? Anything?
One question.
Yeah.
It happened right before I got on the board, but who did our last strategic plan?
Deloach and Associates. And that particular strategic plan did have timelines. I believe it was like A, B, C, and D. So it did give us timelines or time frames to work on things. And a lot of the things in that strategic plan did get accomplished. Were they on schedule? Were they behind schedule? I don't know those answers, but and some of them are ongoing, and some of them are intended to be ongoing. But yes, most strategic plans do have that. But I think it's a good question that we should ask our three proposers and go from that process.
And just in my memory, it seems like we revisited it quite a bit the first or second year, and then it kind of just fell to the wayside of at least revisiting all those different goals. And
I wasn't here during that time frame, but I can guarantee you with this strategic plan, we will stay on schedule and we will follow up with the board on a yearly basis. And much like all of our other plans, whether it be the master plans, a strategic plan, typically you bring these plans to the board for a complete overhaul or update every 5 years. We will also continue to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
I would just like to thank Director Bowman for showing up today. And I think this is an interesting process, and I'm looking forward to see how it all comes together.
Yeah. Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned.
And Brian, you can